Hi, so today we'll talk about ways to improve academic writing and generally about academic writing. And with me, I've got Dr. Marek Kiczkowiak, who is an expert in academic writing. So hopefully we'll talk about some valuable tips and not just that. So firstly, Marek, thank you for being here. And if we could just start by, I did provide some introduction about yourself, but I'm sure you can do it a little bit better. So can you just tell me about yourself, your academic background, and generally, who is Marek Kiczkowiak?
Okay, hi everybody, and thanks first of all for inviting me, Jarek. I really appreciate it, and I hope this video will be useful for anybody trying to write a thesis or a paper in English. And I've been teaching English for over 10 years now in different countries. And most recently, for the last several years, I've been focusing on teaching academic English, specializing in helping students, PhD students, master students improve their academic writing. For the last couple of years, I've taught in Belgium, in a university in a city called Leuven, and also in Brussels. And then before I taught in different universities in the UK on what they call pre-sessional courses. So for students who are admitted to university, but their English isn't good enough yet to start the master's or BA program, and they come in during the summer and we help them improve their academic writing. And apart from that, yeah, I've done a PhD as well in teaching English. That was in 2019. That was in University of York. And yeah, and I'm also, I think another thing that I really like doing in my classes, and I think a lot of students find it useful, is that, like yourself, Jarek, I had to learn English. I had to learn how to write academic papers in English. So apart from, having this experience as a teacher, I also have this experience as a non-native speaker, academic writer, and I think, going through those struggles and overcoming different problems can really help you as a teacher later on.
Yeah, it's very interesting that you mentioned that because we talked before, and we are both quite passionate about the topic of English as a lingua franca and English as a global language in general. But some of the viewers may not know what it's all about. So basically, and the fact that you mentioned that as a non-native English speaker, it is believed, especially in that field, that you can actually be a more effective teacher of English precisely because of what you said, because you yourself had to learn the language. So if you're a native English speaker, of course you acquire the language as your mother tongue, but you don't really think about why you're using certain constructions, why you're speaking the way you are speaking, as opposed to non-native English speakers who, as I said, had to learn the language, so they may understand what problems their students face. So and generally the structures of English. So this is, I think, very important because there seems to be that misconception that native English speaker is the only good and valid teacher of English. So I think it's very interesting that you mentioned that, and I'm planning to come back to the topic a little bit, to the topic of English as a lingua franca and these beliefs, but. Generally, I wondered. So you did TESOL, you did PhD in TESOL, but was there a point? At what point? Why academic English in general? Was there a point when you decided, okay, this is interesting, or I want to support students with academic English? What happened? Was there any reason you chose this?
I'm not sure if there was any particular reason. It was kind of like an organic process of developing as an English teacher. So before I started teaching in universities, I used to teach in language schools and I taught a lot of general English. But then I started teaching more and more IELTS preparation classes, and I became an IELTS examiner. So it was kind of like a small window into academic English, right? And then at one point, I found out that, I could potentially apply to teach academic English on those pre-sessional courses in the UK. So I thought, well, why not? I'll give it a try. And then I really liked it. I thought it was a very valuable experience, and and being able to help people. All those students were really, really motivated, much more so, I think, than in your regular language school, and I really enjoyed it, and that's kind of got me into academic writing.
Okay, so I've been using the term obviously since the beginning of this video, but just to talk about the concept of academic English in the first place. So, what is academic English? Some people may not know that there is a difference between, your, I don't know, normal or everyday English and academic English. So, what is it in a nutshell, and how does it differ from everyday English?
I think that's a very good question, and perhaps if you're new to university or to academic writing, the biggest struggle is really understanding what phrases to use in academic English and which not to use, which to leave, outside of the academia. And I think, one of the biggest differences is the formality in the language. So a lot of students that I coach, their English is excellent, but at the beginning, they write as they speak. So they use the same language in academia as they would outside of the classroom with their friends, or the language that they acquired while they were watching series and films and reading books. But there is a big shift in formality, and I'm sure you already know that from your first language, right? If you were to pick up an academic text in your first language, there would be a huge difference from how people use the language there to how they use it on the street, right? And it's the same in English. There is also other grammar structures are used more frequently or perhaps less frequently. So maybe you've been struggling to learn third conditionals and past perfect and future perfect continuous and all that stuff to get to high levels of English. But in academic writing, really what you're going to see is present simple, past simple, and sometimes present perfect, and that's about it when it comes to the grammar, the tenses. So there are big differences.
Okay, yeah, it's interesting that you say that about the different tenses used. I guess it's good news for for some people who may be anxious about having to use all these tenses, because in fact in everyday English it's not much different in terms of tenses. That of course we use less tenses than we are being taught. So I guess it's a very good thing. But it's also interesting what you said about people trying to make their writing or write in the same way they learned, from movies. Or in my case, I had the same problem when I started my studies, when I started my master's at the university. I like reading, I like writing in general, and I had read a lot of different types of articles, not necessarily academic, as well as a lot of books, and I did try initially to make my writing interesting. So and what is interesting, and I've seen your video where you talk about idioms, which is very interesting. So I was always passionate about idioms when I was learning the language. I really liked how creative they could be, and I did try to use idioms in my writing to make it more interesting, academic writing. But of course, as you said, it's not necessarily acceptable. So I had another question. It's not really a question. It's just something to reflect on, I suppose. We've mentioned English as a lingua franca and global language, where again it is believed that non-native English speakers, not just teachers, they are legitimate users of the language, so we shouldn't necessarily judge their English language ability by the native English speaker standards. So, which means there is plenty, as you know, plenty of research that shows that non-native English speakers can communicate with each other, and they use unconventional structures and not something that we normally teach in school. And nevertheless, they are successful, they understand each other. So, but then it kind of contrasts, don't you think, with the concept of academic English, because there you can't just say the same about academic English. You can, if you write, an article that contains what is traditionally seen as language errors or mistakes, you simply won't. This article simply won't be accepted. So I suppose, like I said, it's a reflection. What do you think about that? Do you think it's a problem, or should we follow these rules or should we not follow
Yeah.
these rules?
Yeah, I'm always in two minds about it because I do think that, especially in exact sciences, where what really matters is not how you say it, but what you say. What really matters is your results, right? It might be slightly different in fields like anthropology, I suppose, where also how you phrase things is very important, right? But I think in fields like quantum physics or something like this, whether somebody writes, makes a mistake with the past tense or not, I'm not sure if what difference it makes, or whether they write, the research who or the research which. It really doesn't matter. It doesn't change anything. But time and time again, I see also with myself, you get these reviewers who come back to you with a comment, your English is really bad, it should be reviewed. And then it turns out that you forgot the third person S, or you forgot an ED. And I kind of think to myself, okay, fair enough, there are some mistakes, but really, is that what you're paying attention to as a reviewer? I think, fair enough if your mistakes really make it difficult to understand your content. That's a completely different story. But there are many that have absolutely no influence on the content. So I think there should be much more attention paid to the content of the article. But I also think that at least when I teach academic writing, I always try to look at how academic English is being currently used. So what I'll do is, for example, if I have students in microbiology, I'll take microbiology papers and I'll analyze them. I'll highlight phrases, how do they state the aim, how do they express the limitations of the study, and then I'll highlight these phrases to my students. And so what that means is that, I'm getting a sample of both first language and second language academic writers, right? And hopefully, the more academia becomes international, the more it will be the case that really, the writing that we're getting and we're using to teach academic writing will be more sort of international English. It's no longer kind of bound to the UK or the US. Having said that, there are still these attitudes, right? That if you miss the third person S, your English is horrible. Right?
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. This is true, and I think that for now we have to accept it. I mean, I see the point, of course, of having some kind of structure, because we cannot just say, as long as you are understood, you're fine. It is important, of course, to follow some kind of structure, but also it would be a shame to see, potentially many scientists or many interesting studies not being published because of what you said of minor mistakes. So yeah, hopefully the attitudes will shift a little bit in the future. But for now, whether we like it or not, we have to follow these rules, follow these structures, and we have to present a certain level of academic writing. Not just when publishing, but of course when studying, when working on our master's or PhD thesis. So let's get to what I wanted to talk about, namely how to improve academic writing. I think this is very, very important. As I said, I think everybody at some point struggles with it. I have struggled with it a lot, so we'll see. I've got some of my own insights based on my experience, but I wondered if you have some advice. So where to start, what to do to improve it.
Yeah, I think the first advice is something that I've just mentioned, which is to analyze papers in your field, right? So if you just come into the academia and you have absolutely no idea how to write a paper in your field, which is understandable, well then download the papers that you have to read for your literature review and start analyzing them. Maybe focus on one thing. Start at the beginning with the introduction. Okay, how do people write the introduction? What elements are necessary? And then kind of try to identify these elements. And then maybe focus on one of those elements more specifically. Okay, so in here they've identified the research gap. What phrases did they use to identify the research gap? Okay, this writer uses this phrase. I'll underline it. This other writer uses this. And then you could, don't go crazy and write down 50 different phrases, but maybe write down 5, and then put them on a piece of paper, on a post-it note next to your computer. And then when you start writing something, use those phrases, have them somewhere next to you. But I think by analyzing the papers and consciously paying attention to how the writers structure the papers and what language they use to express different things, will take you a really, really long way. I think, that would be probably the best tip that I could give you.
Yeah, I really love it because this is something that I remember from my own experience, and I was going to say that there is probably no way around it, that you just have to read a lot, of course, and hopefully you understand that if you're thinking about academic career. And I think, and this is also what helped me, just as you said, because I've been reading so much. It's just like with children who learn, a new language just by being surrounded by it. So it's kind of the same. If you read a lot, then even without making conscious effort or without making notes, of course, you will probably start remembering some of these structures. But also, as you said, and this is exactly what I did as well, I was highlighting certain phrases, because at the end of the day there aren't that many. It's not probably, I'm not sure if you agree, but there isn't that many phrases. There aren't that many phrases. It's not that complex, as complex as it seems. So for example, you will be using, you also talk about it in one of your videos, you'll be using a phrase, we conducted a study, quite a lot. So these are maybe not in terms of the structure itself, but just the phrases, the words that you want to use, and or carried out or conducted, research study. I don't even think I know, of many more phrases to say that. So essentially,
I agree with you that, it's not like reading, Charles Dickens or literature, that you need to use a lot of synonyms and make it interesting or anything. No, unfortunately, academic writing is boring and is very structured and uses certain formulas. And the same goes for structure, that, obviously it varies from discipline to discipline, but still there are very similar conventions. Every introduction to a paper will always have some background information highlighting the importance of the topic. They will briefly present what we already know about the topic, and then what we don't know, which is the research gap, and then they will state the aim, And it might vary how long it is, whether the literature review and introduction will be in the same section, separate, but it's basically a formula that you can follow. And if you're able to identify these elements from reading the papers that you have to read anyway, your academic writing will become much, much better.
Yeah, and this is very important as well, that I've been kind of focusing on the words and terms and concepts in academic writing. But as you said, a lot of academic writing, probably the majority of what the concept of what we understand as academic writing, is not even about specifically about the terms or the words, but about the structure, just like you said. So I think it's very important to understand these, structure of individual paragraphs. So again, some basic rules where you introduce, the topic, and then you kind of expand on it, and then in the final, I think, sentence, you again kind of summarize what you said. So I think it's very important. So do you think, is there anything else that we can do? So obviously this is an extremely powerful tip, the first one. So read a lot and make notes and consciously try to understand the structure of what you're reading. So is there anything else that we can do?
Yeah, I think, a lot of people think that perhaps the vocabulary, or maybe even some people think that the grammar is the most important thing, that they, when somebody thinks my English is bad, they usually think grammar, I make grammar mistakes. But I think in my experience as an English, as an academic writing tutor, I think really what matters most is the structure. Obviously the language is very important, but I find that, your English can be on an intermediate level, but you could still potentially write a very logical paper using the vocabulary that you have, or some of the vocabulary identified in the text. But on the other hand, if your English can be fantastic, but if you don't know how to structure your ideas, it will become gibberish, really. I've had native speakers as well study with me, and and they come out sometimes with utter gibberish, not because their English is bad, their English is fantastic. It's just that they don't know how to structure things. So I think this is also much easier to fix, right? Because to improve your vocabulary, say, or to improve your grammar, it will take longer. But I think to learn what is the structure of the introduction, it's much faster, and to apply it, you could really do it in a couple of days if you pay attention to that. And also what you said, how to structure a paragraph, it's very, very important, you know, that you start a paragraph, as you said, with a topic sentence, and then every sentence in that paragraph needs to be logically connected to that first sentence. And I think a lot of students fail at that. So my advice is usually to use those linking words like however, in addition, and really think about what is the purpose of the sentence that I've just written. Am I giving an example? And then I should say maybe for example. Am I showing contrast? Am I giving a cause or an effect? And if you can't figure this out, if you write a sentence and you don't know what's the point of that sentence, then probably that sentence doesn't belong in this paragraph.
Then don't write it if you don't know. Yeah, it's very good. So I'm just trying to organize it in my mind. So let's say tip number 2 would be to really focus on structure. This is definitely very important to think about structure. Tip number 3, of course, it's all connected. I'm just trying to kind of organize it. Again, make a conscious effort and think about what you are writing. So think about the linking words, like you said, think about the purpose of individual sentence. And on the topic of structure, I just wanted to add that I definitely agree that it's very easy to make your writing bad if you don't follow the structure. And I've seen that, I've seen plenty of examples of that as well. And as you said, I think I would rather read a well-structured paper or you know, any kind of document with potential minor language mistakes, or maybe, you know, some wrong words being used, but it's still well structured, rather than, like you said, a native English speaker's piece of writing where there is no structure. So the language may be great, it may be amazing, but if there isn't a good structure, as a reader, it's just so easy to get lost and confused completely. And so I agree that I would always take that over the other one. So that's, I think, is a very, very good tip. And also, if your structure is good, I guess you can always have your work, which is still preferable and recommended, proofread before submission. So, you know, so I wouldn't worry that much about the minor mistakes. But if the structure is there, you should be okay. Okay, so so these are definitely really good and really powerful tips, and there's definitely a lot you can do on your own. In terms of the structure, for example, I remember I was working with a great book. I can't remember. I think it was called How to Write a Thesis. I'll try to find it and link to it in the description. But it's obviously also good to have support from a professional. So the reason I invited you here, I obviously wanted to hear your advice, but also I wanted to ask about what you do currently and how do you support students with their academic writing. I think it's very important to have, you know, to have somebody that you can reach out to, and, you know, if you're really struggling. So I know that you do plenty of things. You do courses and perhaps some other individual lessons. I'm not sure. So what do you do at the moment? You have your own initiative in terms of academic writing support.
So I run academic writing courses on academicenglishnow.com, and the course is designed for masters and PhD students, and also young researchers who are just starting out in academic writing and need to write papers. And the course is completely online, which a lot of students like, in the way that, you know, there are no live lessons anymore, but all the content is divided into small 3-5 minute how-to videos. For example, how to state a research gap, you know, that you can watch in your free time. Because my experience with PhD master students is that they have so much to do that trying to get people for a live class, especially a group class, is basically impossible. So this gives you the opportunity to kind of rewatch the videos, do them in your own time, and also to go through the exercises there are. There are quizzes, handouts with vocabulary, And it's I've sort of taken as an English teacher, I've grown tired of this approach, sort of grammar approach to learning a language, where you have to learn past simple first to be able to do something. So my approach is more through tasks, So one task is to write an introduction, and then there are several smaller tasks, like how to state the aim. That's a task that you have to do. And any language or grammar is kind of connected to that. So that's my course, Academic Writing Mastery, which is fully online and available on my website. And I also have a YouTube channel where I try to share weekly tips. I usually post a longer video on Wednesday, and then one shorter video as well, focusing specifically on academic vocabulary. In 1 minute, I give you a typical phrase from academic writing.
Yeah, these are great. I've definitely, I will link to both of the things that you mentioned in the description. I love the short videos that you mentioned. They are short. They're 1 minute, just like you said, or 2 minutes, sometimes 3 minutes. I think if that's still the same category, I'm not sure, but they are great. And as you said, and I like the idea of the course as well, because it does give you, I mean, I would personally prefer to have to enroll in such course rather than in live training, precisely because of what you said, because you can, not everybody has time, and you can always come back to the videos. You can treat it as a book that you can, always come back to. I love that there is practice that you mentioned. There are some practice exercises or quizzes, which is very important. And the book that I mentioned, the reason I liked it so much was specifically because it had some practice involved. So it's not just detached from practice. So not just theory. I don't think that you can just effectively learn anything exclusively through theory with no practice. So I really like the idea. So I'll put the link if any of you want to check Marek's courses or YouTube channel. I will put the link in the description. So I think that's all, and thank you for these tips. I think they were great. They were amazing. So thank you again for agreeing to be interviewed, and hopefully we can have a similar session in the future and maybe develop this topic, because I'm sure there's plenty and more that we could discuss.
Yeah, thanks a lot for inviting me. I really enjoyed it.
Alright, yeah, so if you enjoyed the video, please like the video, and also don't forget to check Marek's channel and all the links that I've been mentioning.